Oh boy. Okay, so I'm jumping ahead with Megacorps because, well, I played a two-player game of this a few months back. Rather enjoyed it. It's got really poor ratings, but I think there's an interesting game here, actually. We'll see how it works out. I say, oh boy, because life's gotten really complicated in terms of the flow of things that I feel like I owe a review for. The intention here was to do Republic of Carthage, but I had a issue with my putting it together, actually, and probably shouldn't have even done it, but anyway. And now I just got something else in the mail that I would kind of like to get out quickly as well, but I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to. Republic of Carthage is going to be a long game for me. It's going to take a couple of weeks, there's no question. And I want to make sure I give it the right attention that I do. All right, let's take a look at this one, which was meant to cover my gluing issues. So the goal of this game is to collect the most money. And you have a number of things here. Each person is going to be one of these Megacorps. And all of them are kind of plays on real life companies. Windows is my favorite. Each player, well, there's also obviously money available. The board itself is kind of interesting. It represents the locations of various sectors of industry in different countries. And you're going to make money by sort of dominating the sectors, getting monopolies in certain sectors, and then being able to trigger payouts when it's effective for you. Outside of the player control markers, we get these little mercenary markers, cash money, which is actually fairly decent. A little thin, but these mark different government forms, and then other factions. Like these are things that can happen to companies where they become non-controlled companies. But this is a game which kind of combines the idea of these corporations being so powerful that they control the actions of the companies that they reside, of the countries that they reside in. So it's kind of like a reverse take of, I don't know, maybe kind of feels a little like Imperial, but in a modern day situation. And then players also have the opportunity to have these cards. Now, those cards are going to be special abilities, and they're often quite powerful, but some of them are more quite powerful than others. And let's see, anything else here that we want to talk about right off the bat? A couple of, this is to mark who's the current active player, which just indicates the starter for the round. And this is just a placeholder to remind that someone's chosen to pay out, and that puts some restrictions on them. On the board itself, outside of the companies and the countries, some of the companies are not within countries, and that means they're not affected by countries, and they have some special cases in some senses. So, for example, open source is syndicalized at the beginning of the game, and I don't think that can change, although maybe a card would allow it to change. Asteroid and L5, those haven't been created yet. You have to basically play a card to bring them into play. Not all the cards are in the game, and some of them got handed out in setup. You see some of the players actually have cards, but not all. And some of them were withdrawn from the game. I'm trying a 6-player game. I've only actually played this illegally in 2, and I had a lot of fun in 2, actually. But I think I misplayed. I played with a rule misunderstanding in that case. I might do that again. Not that particular misunderstanding. All right, let's explain the rules. And to start with that, let's explain how we got where we are in the setup. Initially, some countries are already controlled by certain companies. There are also 2 that are determined at random. And I just rolled a die for who got them. They can't be the same company that gets both of them. There's some information on the countries too that I haven't gone over yet, which includes military power here, and in defense and attack force essentially, as well as the country's current form of government, but that can change due to card play. And also you have this little income creation chart, which that's where I misplayed. Okay, so those two get rolled, different companies end up in each of them, and anybody who does not have one country gets 2 cards. So these two have gotten 2 cards because they don't have control of a country. Anyone who only has one country gets 1 card, and that ended up being these two. And anyone with 2 countries under their control will not get a card at all. And that's sort of a balancing factor that probably works. You have a different number of cards in the event deck based on the number of players, and that is kind of important because not only does it shorten the game and keep the time scale, the amount of time you're going to be playing the game in somewhat of a balance, but it also is important in terms of making sure that everybody gets the same number of turns where they're the starting player. So, like I said, the object of the game is to get the most money. At the beginning of the game, well, at the beginning of any given round, the person with the active player card gets to draw one of those Megacorps cards. And that just is a bonus that goes in their hand. After they do so, they get to take an action, and then each other player gets to take 1 action. And then the active player card is going to move, and a new round happens. Now, there's the concept of a payout, which is when this is triggered. You're allowed a maximum of 1 for an entire round, and somebody has to take their action to do it. And whoever does it gets this paid marker, which indicates that they can't do the next payout action. So there's 2 restraints or constraints on the payout actions. One is that you haven't done one, or that no one's done one this round, and the other is that you haven't done the last one. That becomes very interesting in a 2-player game because someone with a lot of money can decide to withhold from doing a payout action and kind of starve the other person out. We won't be seeing that here or in really any number of players above 2, which the game doesn't even support. So, okay, what actions can you take? You can buy a company. You pay 4 of these euros and you just place a marker down wherever you like on a company that's available to be purchased, something that no one else owns and that hasn't been nationalized or syndicalized. There are restrictions to this, though. If someone owns the country that you're trying to buy a company in, you may not be allowed to do it. In particular, well, we'll get into that in a little bit. It has to do with anti-monopoly policies. You can choose to pay out a single industry. You announce what industry it is, you take the paid card, and you must not have had it already, and no one else can have paid out already. You pick an industry, and then people will be getting cash based on the number of different competing corporations and miners involved in it. You can buy mercenaries. You'll get a collection of mercenaries for this. You get them for free, but you could also negotiate to purchase them from other players who have the capability to make them. You can launch a war against another country, and basically you assemble all the countries you control and your mercenaries, and you attack that country. And that becomes a comparison of force to defense. It's actually fairly easy to take over countries this way. Or you can pass and do nothing. Okay. So there's the antitrust issue here. If you want to buy a company in a country that someone else owns, and you own another company in that industry, they can block you. You still get to buy a company, if you choose, but you don't get to change your action to something else. So, you could negotiate beforehand. Of course, they could screw you over. When you pay out industries, if you choose the payout industry action, Um, what's going to happen is you count up the number of total competing companies in the industry. And that starts at 1. Okay? So if Lenovo owned all of these, we would still have 1 competitor in play, not the 0. The 0 can only be reached through card play. There's shortage cards. The way you count the number of competitors there are is each corporation counts as a competitor. Doesn't matter how many different companies they hold. Any blank ones, any that aren't controlled, count as competitors. Any syndicalized ones count as competitors. And any nationalized ones count as competitors if the country isn't controlled by one of the players who already is involved. So for example, let's take this example here. Lenovo owns China, and let's say China has been nationalized their defense industry. Well, Lenovo would count as 1, 2, 3 competitors total. And that indicates the amount of money you get per company that you actually own. The nationalized company that Lenovo is able to prevent competing from them doesn't count towards their profits, however. And this is where I think I screwed up in the 2-player game, if I recall correctly. I think I played it that you just got this amount of money. So there wasn't really a great advantage to, say, trying to hold a lot of different companies in an industry if someone else could slip in. And that created some really interesting dynamics that I liked. But this is a little bit more believable, perhaps. I'm not sure. Where else are we? Okay, government intervention. This is an action that you can take. If you control a government, you can intervene in order to essentially interfere with somebody else's company. In a democracy, you can force them to divest from the company. So, I don't know. If Lenovo's here and Globo owns control of the North American Free Trade Zone, Globo could say, look, Lenovo, you can't own that. I'm going to force you to divest from it. And they get the €4 that they pay, that presumably they paid to get the company. I should be careful not to screw up my setup. And they're no longer in control. Of course, they could conceivably just go back in, except if the antitrust provision applied. So nationalizing versus buying, it becomes kind of this game of chicken that neither player really wants to go down. If it is a kleptocracy, you're allowed to steal things. You just take that company from them. So nobody wants to go into a kleptocracy because somebody else can take that company from them for free, unless they have some kind of agreement to avoid that. And dictatorships are allowed to nationalize a company. They simply replace the current owner with a nationalization. And again, there's no money being handed out in either a kleptocracy or a dictatorship. These are just taken over. If you choose to buy mercenaries, you will normally get one mercenary for each defense company that you own. And you can buy for €1 each a number of unowned, nationalized, or syndicalized. You count the number of those companies, and you can buy that many mercenaries for 1 each. And then, if anyone else owns defense companies, you can cut a deal with them and pay them whatever amount of money that you can agree to get additional mercenaries for that, at that cost. Now there's a clone soldiers card, which once that's been played, we not only do defense companies count, but biotech companies also count, and will add to the number of mercenaries that we have available for production, purchase, whatever. You can launch a war. During your turn, if you choose to launch a war, you have to have a mercenary in hand. You announce what country you're attacking. Any countries you control add their force to that value. So Glabo currently has a force of 2, plus they'd have a mercenary. That gives them a total strength of 3. If they attack a player-owned country, if they attack any country, it gets its defense value. If it's a player-owned country, that player gets their mercenaries added into the defense. They don't get to add all their countries into some sort of global world war, though. In either case, mercenaries can be sold or given to the players involved. If there's a neutral country being attacked, people can just give it mercenaries, but they'll only last for that combat. In order to resolve the war, the attacker adds up his total force value and his mercenaries, as does the defender, his defense value and mercenaries. And if the attacker's bigger, he wins. He gets control of the country, and he gets his control marker there. If the defender is bigger or even, the defender wins and gets to keep control of the country. If the attacker's the only person if the attacker's the only person who uses mercenaries, he loses 1. But if both sides used mercenaries, the smaller number of mercenaries is eliminated from both sides. It's like an exchange in a war game. This doesn't have anything to do with the force values or the winner here. It's just mercenaries have a certain cost when you use them, and they get them lost. Okay, as soon as the war is over, if it's against a player, the person who won can do a government intervention against one company owned by the opponent in the country of the war, the target. This is true whichever company won the war. So you can purge disloyal elements or whatever. There's some neutral countries here, and these are not going to be, they're treated, they can't be attacked in a war. They're not really countries, except for Switzerland anyway. You could attack an unowned country, in which case you don't get to take the purging action against the government action against an enemy company. The event cards themselves, you can hold on to them as long as you like, play them kind of at will. They do have points at which they state that they can be played, though. So, for example, this one, which is interesting, shortages, you would pay this during a payout, which it states right there. And you can actually pay it as a result to the payout action being chosen, or to cards that generate an automatic payout. Now, cards that generate an automatic payout don't count as a payout in terms of preventing someone else from choosing a payout as an action. Okay. The game is going to end if there are no event cards available at the beginning of a round. What that means is if you drew the last event card, everybody plays one more round, and then we're going to hit a special scoring round where all industries pay out. I think you're allowed to play event cards. Event cards may not be paid during the industry payouts after the end of the game. So you want to use them all in that last round if you haven't used them. Okay. Sometimes there's a greedy kleptocrats card, or there is one, or some, that allow a player to pick a kleptocracy and hold an auction for it. In that case, everybody secretly selects money that they want to throw in as a bid for control of that kleptocracy. Once everybody's selected it, they're revealed. Whoever has the highest bid gains control of the kleptocracy. If there's a tie, it remains unowned. It becomes unowned. If nobody bids anything, it remains the way it is. And only the winning bidder has to pay money. In a case of a tie, nobody has to pay. I kind of think that's a shame. I feel like you should be able to be forced to pay. I don't know. I guess not. There are elections and vote of no confidence cards. These allow control for a democracy. The way these work is that each media company in the game has a vote towards any given democracy. And whoever is selected with the most votes for that gets control of it. You don't have to cast your votes there for yourself. You could throw them into someone else. And is this done secretly? It doesn't really specify how the voting is handled in an election. The open source starts out syndicalized. I don't know if it can come out of that. Other companies can become syndicalized through event cards. Those cannot be owned by a player, but they count as a competitor no matter what. Switzerland, Asteroids, and the L5 Society and the open source software are not considered countries to be controlled. You can't do government intervention in them. These two don't exist at the beginning of the game. The Swiss Financial does exist, and it can be purchased as any other company. It can't be dominated by the country, though. There's a new government form, in addition to the ones that are available, this wiki syndicalism. The designer, Greg Kostikin, doesn't know what the hell that might represent, but he's just saying it's something else. When a country becomes wiki syndicalized, it gets it has a different kind. It can only happen to democracies, and when it happens, the government intervention is a takeover. The €4 are paid just like in a democracy, but the company becomes syndicalized and works the same rules that any syndicalized company does. It'll compete with everyone, and it probably can't be changed. You can trade anything you got. Control of countries, companies, money, cards, mercenaries to any other player at any time. You can make promises as deals, but they're not binding. But there is a specific prohibition. If you have to leave the game, you can't hand off your stuff. It just all disappears. Just to prevent someone from being pissy about something like that. When you play out after the final turn, you're going to pay out once for every single industry in the game. There can't be any event cards during that, and then whoever has the most cash on hand wins the game after that. And that's about it. Fairly simple. Let's see how it actually plays out in a lot of people.